Welcome to Encouragement for Living Life with Lockwood and Lockwood. The guys are here to encourage you in your attempt to live more confidently and successfully in our world. They are highly trained and experienced mental health professionals, but they are not your mental health professional. They are sharing encouragement through information and discussion. People are complex. Just because an idea helps one person doesn't mean it will help someone else. You need to consult with your own professional who will hopefully know what is best for you in your situation. Now, it's time for Lockwood and Lockwood.
The title of this podcast is How to Recover from Alcoholism/Addiction. Well, I want to start out and tell a little bit of my story. It's just, there's so many different stories, and I'll tell you a lot of bits and pieces of other people's stories too that I know, because I have experience both educationally, training-wise, and personally. And again, I always like to say when I talk about this, if I get drunk, ain't AA's fault. So I'll talk about my AA involvement, but it ain't about AA, it's about me. Okay? Yeah. So don't, so understand that. All right. Yeah, I'm in graduate school, right? I'm drinking off and on and going to school and depressed as hell and get through graduate school, and I get working in a treatment program. I'm still drinking, which I tell people, I like to joke, I'm an expert in denial. So I'm treating alcoholics in an inpatient unit in a hospital-based program. We were talking about different kinds of programs, one of those podcasts, and I go to this 2-week workshop in Minneapolis called the Johnson Institute, which was a leader in training. And they used to call it chemical dependency treatment back then. Alcohol is chemical dependency treatment. Famous, guy Vernon Johnson, and they started this institute to train counselors, train social workers, counselors, psychiatrists, psychologists in the treatment of alcoholism, and also how to do intervention. They're the founder of the intervention process in the treatment field of alcoholism and addiction. So I'm listening to this guy talk, Bromley Johnson, the son of Vernon Johnson, and he gives this talk called The Feeling Chart, and I listen to him, and I go back to my room, and we're in dorm rooms, right? And I have a roommate, and I'm just laying there thinking, shit, I think I'm an alcoholic. It was almost like a moment of clarity that we call an AA, and all of a sudden I could relate to what Bromley Johnson was talking about in his lecture, in the progression of alcoholism. So I went and talked to a staff person. My roommate took me to my first meeting at I think it was St. Mary's Hospital in Minneapolis, my first AA meeting. I knew who to call in AA back in St. Louis because there's a double winner, AA Al-Anon, and I had been going to Al-Anon that's a long story, but anyway. So I called this guy and I started my recovery. And what I like to tell people about my recovery, it was easy because I came in surrendered and just willing to do virtually whatever I was suggested to do. Now, if someone was telling me, putting a finger in my face, I'll guarantee you I wouldn't be doing what they wouldn't be my sponsor. You know what I'm saying? But give me suggestion, I went and did it. And I realized looking back, part of the reason I did things, I didn't want anybody to be in control of me. So I was going to do what I was supposed to so nobody could be in control of me. It was real. I didn't understand that for a long time. But if you looked at it on the surface, you said work a step, read a chapter. I was going to read a chapter. I was going to work a step. I was going to pray. I was going to do whatever was recommended for me to do. So anyway, so my recovery was fairly easy in terms of doing what we call the next right thing. So I got a home group in AA, and this is all AA based. We're going to talk about other kinds of ways to recover too today. For people that, again, aren't interested in a spiritual approach to recovery, because a lot of people that are not, it's important that they know there's resources for them also. And some of the things overlap, by the way, between the two, non-spiritual and spiritual. But I dug into AA, and I was never a great meeting goer because I always had weird schedules. So I was always at my home group. We call it, unless you're dead, out of town, over 100 miles, or in the hospital, they won't let you out on pass. You go to your home group. You show up. I was in the right home group. God kind of put me in the right home group. And by the way, my introduction to my home group, how I got there, well, when I got back from the Johnson Institute, I knew this guy in AA from Al-Anon, and he invited me on a float trip. And on the flow trip, he said to who eventually became my sponsor later, said, go invite Lee to group. Knew I needed to go to group. And when I got there, there was about 12 people there. It was a fairly new group, a year or so old, and it split off from another group, more of the younger guys. And looking back, God sent me to a group that probably 95% of the people there had been abused. It was, and we didn't all know. We didn't talk about that stuff back then. We didn't understand that kind of stuff back then. But it was a bunch of angry guys. A bunch of guys who, you call tough guys, and I tell people I used to be able to clear a crowd with my face. I could walk through and make a hole in the crowd with my face. I was so angry, you don't mess with me. Even angry guys in AA didn't mess with me generally because I was so irrationally angry, and it just reeked out of me for them. But I fit right in. And the other thing about that group is we're highly committed. I don't know, I'm not sure quite why, but we were angry, but we were also highly committed to recovery. Over the years, there's probably been well over 15 guys who've had well over 30 plus years of continuous sobriety from that group. And that's a pretty frickin' high success rate. But anyway, I was led to the right group. And Skip, by the way, my sponsor did not like my home group. Because of how we kind of told people what to do. If you didn't work a step, we're going to tell you to get the fuck out of here or work, excuse my French, sorry, it still slips out when I get excited, or work the steps. Get a sponsor, do what you're told. And I think it's part of the reason people recovered, because we didn't mess around with people. Took it very seriously. And like I said, that stayed with the people that went to our group. And people that came in that didn't have the kind of background we had found our group pretty offensive. Because there's a lot of cussing, a lot of meanness, but a lot of love, a lot of come be part of. And, we're going to give you a hug. If you want to fight, we'll fight you in the parking lot afterwards, but we're going to give you a hug first. You kind of guys. We guys in the group that had thrown guards off the second tier Florida State penitentiaries, guys that had killed people and they're using time. We had a group of guys who had gone through a lot, and because of that, there was a tremendous amount of love. At the same time, there was a tremendous amount of anger, and that's attractive as can be. And we went to dinner at 6 o'clock every Friday night, probably for about an hour and a half or better, and then did a meeting from 8. And as our group got bigger and bigger and bigger, and it grew over 35, 40 people. We'd go to 11:30, and we finally had to stop and cap it at 10 o'clock because it was always a group where anybody could talk about anything, and they did. So no matter what you had going on, you could be screwing around your wife or, being abusive or losing jobs or, being frickin' depressed, suicidal, abuse. People would talk about their abuse. You could talk about anything in the group, which was unique to AA. A lot of AA groups, you talk to your sponsor about most things like that, but you don't talk about them in the group. Well, our group culture was you talked about whatever you needed to talk about because your sobriety was your life at stake. So
right.
Deal with it, and we'll help you deal with it.
Yeah.
So if you're in my group, you're going to work the steps. You're going to have a sponsor. Do what they say. My sponsor's rule was just you're at least willing to try it. And that was fine. And by the way, my first sponsor, was very gentle with me because I was very hard on myself. So I'd oversleep and go late to work. He'd go, well, you probably were really tired. Now, that wasn't always the case with a lot of people, but he just kind of saw through some of the defenses I had and went, well, this guy's really hard on himself. As it turns out, I was a guy loaded with shame. So you're going to be really hard on yourself and kind of hate yourself. So
right.
Anyway, but I got firmly entrenched in that meeting. There was a time when I changed jobs and I couldn't go for a while, but ended up back at my home group, And he was my sponsor for many years until he passed away from old age. COVID got him, but he had COPD and heart problems, and really was that ended his life. But anyway, but I did it the old-fashioned way. I did it simply because I was going to do what it took to do what they told me to do. People, my sponsor listened well to me. Both my sponsors listened well to me, which is what I needed, because I listened to people all week, and I need someone to listen to me. They were very supportive. When I had a question or a problem, they could share what they did, how they did things. I wasn't told a lot what to do. I think they both sensed that you're not going to tell me what to do. I'm not going to take that well, feeling controlled. I didn't trust anybody, and I began to trust both those men. In between, I had a different sponsor that didn't work out. Didn't have cell phones back then, and he traveled a lot. But anyway, and I had another sponsor one time for a short period of time that just told me cute stories, and I was checked out, and I needed someone to get in there and help start working a program. I don't know if I told you about him, but he was actually Skip's first sponsor, but by then he'd been sober so long, he was just into telling cute stories. And I couldn't tell him what was going on with me because I was so far out there, because I drifted, because I got busy, I got successful. The hardest time for recovery is when you have a wife and children and a career that you're developing. It's when you're the most busy and involved with your life that you have to still keep your recovery priority. So I didn't go to your sister's marching band. I did one so I could see her march at football games, but that was my home group night, so I wasn't going to be there regularly. But I go to all of your guys' stuff where you sang or things like that, that were on different days, but highly committed, which is why so many of us have stayed sober for so long, There's proof in the pudding, and we call it going any lengths to stay sober. And people who do that tend to stay sober, but also I want to add for people, just my experience, if you have an active involvement with God, you have much easier time staying sober in the long run. I've seen a lot of people leave AA and crash and burn. And there are people typically, if I look back, that never talked about God. Never. They lost probably what you're talking about, son, humility. Or they had so much shame they wanted to be normal, so they left AA. And then they would crash and burn because they wanted to be normal. Normal meant not being an alcoholic. To me, being an alcoholic is no different from being diabetic. I just got to take care of it. And that's what I do to this day. I take care of my alcoholism. Got a sponsor. Go to meetings. Read. Pray. I used slogans a lot when I was new. My head was going so fast I couldn't do much else. I couldn't even use a serenity prayer, man. I had to just say easy does it a lot because my mind was going so fast. But anyway, that's my story. But it's going to lead to some important things about recovery from alcoholism. So I want to start with a simple definition of alcoholism addiction. You want to take a shot at that?
Well, I mean, there's a bunch of different definitions. So you're gonna have to be a little more specific about what you want. Do you want the one out of chapter 5, the big book? Like, what do you want? Like,
Well, the easiest definition, I like to keep it simple for people. The easiest definition is a harmful dependency on a mood-altering drug. And there are classes of mood-altering drugs: sedatives, alcohol is a sedative, sleeping pills, things like anti-anxiety agents, painkillers, opiates, all that kind of stuff. Hallucinogenics, we put THC in there because it's closest to an hallucinogenic than any other drug, although it's kind of in its own category. And stimulants, of course, cocaine, methamphetamine, phenamine, etc. So it's a harmful dependency. But AA really puts it in a better way. AA says we're bodily and mentally different than other people. And most people don't understand, and there's a lot of people in AA don't understand this either. Bodily and mentally different. What does that mean? Bodily means that when I start drinking, I cannot predict what's going to happen after I take the first drink. I could drink 1 or 2, or I could drink 2 bottles, 2 fifths, which I've done. Okay? I cannot predict what's going to happen. I just know I'll lose control. All right, so some people can't stop drinking. Some people can't stop once they start. And AA is really accurate about that. But there's another part to alcoholism that this is the part most people do not get. That after I would drink and something bad would happen, I'd wake up with a door kicked out, a window busted out, an assault, a lot of fun things that happened to me, I'm being facetious, when I was drinking because of loss of control. Within a day or two later, it was as if nothing happened. And I'd drink again. Not remembering that, whoa, because I just drank last weekend, I ended up throwing up in the student union at college, ended up passing out on a slab of concrete and end up in the ER. It would be like that never happened. And I'd start drinking again. And then eventually something bad would happen. I'd lose control. And most people do not get the mental part of this disease. AA does. That we're mentally different, which means we tend not to remember what happened the last time we were using or drinking, which then gives us permission mentally to do it again. It's as if we lost recall of the information that we needed to say, hey, you got a problem, watch it, beware of it, and maybe you have to do something about it. That function was missing. And that's the key, I believe, to recovery. To admit you got a problem, you have to see it, don't you? You got to be able to see it. It's like the anorexic. I used to, when I worked out at Bally's years ago, and I'd see an anorexic walking around, usually a girl, I had this compulsion. I used to tell your mom, I had this compulsion to walk over to them and said, do you realize that you're dying? Because an anorexic really believes that they're fat. When they look in the mirror, they see fat. They don't see someone that looks like a stick figure. They see fat that they've got to do something about by restricting intake. Okay, it literally is a delusion. Johnson Institute called it a sincere delusion that the alcoholic sincerely cannot tell they're an alcoholic. I was treating a guy for years. I called it an intervention. It really wasn't counseling. It was really an intervention trying to get him into treatment. He almost died twice while I was treating him. He passed out in a hot tub from drinking. He fell down on a bathroom floor, marble floor, from drinking. Could have killed himself twice, ended up in the ER, but within a day or so was drinking again. And the only way I knew, he could not see the fact that he was alcoholic in a way to be willing to do something about it, which was more than coming to see me once a week. I tried to get him in inpatient treatment. And unfortunately, I had a wife who got more from him financially by enabling him to actively drink until his money was used up, because he wasn't working. He was too chronically alcoholic to work anymore, but he still had a hunk of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars still. So if she took a stand on him and kicked him out, she'd lose access to that. So she would never stand up to him, which was tragic, because this guy could not on his own go, I got a problem, I need to do something about it. So that's living a sincere delusion, that I'm not that bad. Another guy, when I worked in a hospital-based program, that was telling me in my office one day that he just drinks beer, and this is his third time in treatment. Well, the next day he was dead from esophageal varices, even just drinking beer. Yeah. It wore through his esophagus and hit veins, and he bled to death. And back then, internally, it was very hard to repair that and stop the bleeding quick enough for them not to die. And he died. But the day before in my office, he's sitting there saying, well, it's not that bad, I just drink beer. People die from alcohol's addiction, and I don't know what the rates of success are now for sobriety. Years ago, they were like 2 or 3 out of 36 will ever recover. That's not a good stat, and I'm not sure it's much better now with all the treatment we got.
No, it's not.
Because of delusion, but alcohol to me is you're just bodily and mentally different. You just can't deal with it. I tell people I just deal with it too well. I like it too much. I just lose control, and I'm going to forget what I did and do it again, or worse, as the case may be. So that's a hard thing. So the first step is, can you admit you got a problem? Somebody listening to us might be able to listen to us, and the light bulb may go on like it did for me, and go, God, this guy's talking about me. And I go, if that's true, good for you, because that's the first step, that you're willing to say, I've got a problem. Because if you don't see it, you won't be willing to do a darn thing about it. And before, no one could have told me I had a problem before that moment of clarity came. I would have just told you to F off. And most people were not going to speak up to me because they would not get a real cordial response from me. So anyway, so if you can admit you got a problem, that's a great, great step. And then the next step is, what do you need? I've treated 2 cases in my office, not many in my office, because most people need more than an office. But 2 guys that both entered the hospital from their drinking, married, that were able to not drink for periods of time before they'd relapse. So I tried them on an outpatient basis. I'd see them twice a week, once by themselves, once with their spouse. And they'd go to AA, and I'd treat them for 6 months. Structured cognitive kind of behavioral spiritual treatment. And I'd help them learn how to get a sponsor, how to use a sponsor, know themselves enough to know what the difficult points for them triggers are, things like that. And then they decide after the end of 6 months whether they want to work on other related issues after that, and then left that up to them. So some people you can treat like that. Some people like me go straight into AA and work a program and stabilize and grow over time. Now, of course, I also had a lot of therapy for other stuff, and stuff too, which in my case, but I didn't go to therapy for alcoholism. I remember getting mad at my analyst and going, "You never talked to me about my drinking." He looked at me and said, "You never tell me anything about your drinking." I got a little mental blank spot there, So, no, I don't have a problem with drinking. Anyway, but so once you can get past the delusion and admit that you got a problem, that's the start. And then what kind of help do you need? What level of help do you need? You want to touch on that, son? Because I believe you don't put out a house fire with a squirt gun.
Yeah. I want to go back to your definition first, because I think there's an important distinction between being out of control versus actually having an addiction, right? So you're using the word alcoholism. I'm going to use the word addiction because it's less focused on one substance.
I got you.
Sure. And I think a lot of people in the recovery world use those 2 words interchangeably.
They do.
But I think most people nowadays just talk about the word addiction. So if we want to create a very general model that's not AA specific, addiction is a combination of 3 things. So it's physical dependence, where your body literally needs it to feel normal again, combined with what we call psychological dependence. And then the third thing, which my mentor John Daly came up with, or at least kind of reformulated, is this thing called a pathological relationship to intoxication. Notice that he didn't say euphoria or feeling good. It's just the state of being intoxicated, being under the influence of a substance, right? So it's tolerance and withdrawal, which is what we call dependence, where you have increasingly being able to use more of it and have bad withdrawal symptoms. That's one thing. That's why a lot of people go back to drinking, etc., is because they physically need it to feel normal again, right?
Well, hold on now. Hold on. He's wrong. You're wrong. Most people don't reach the stage of physical dependency till they're in the middle to late addiction progression.
You want to put some money on that?
But they have loss of control. But they don't necessarily have physical dependency where you're going to see a withdrawal syndrome. They can go without that for half the disease and then eventually develop it.
This is where you're wrong, because you don't understand. There's 2 things.
Well, what do you mean by physical dependency? Because the way you described it was physical addiction to physical dependency.
Addiction is a catch-all word. Dependency is a specific scientific word. Dependency means that 2 things, right? So there's your liver. If we're just going to talk about alcohol as the easy example. So your liver starts to change every time you drink, specifically. And just so everyone knows, whatever your current pattern of drinking is, whether or not you have a drug problem, your liver it's smart. It wants you to not die. It's called the liver. It helps you live. So your liver is very smart. It pays attention to your drinking behavior. So if you drink once a week, your liver has already tuned up the 2 enzymes that break down alcohol to accommodate for once a week drinking. If you drink 5 times a week, your liver is paying attention to that.
Yeah.
So that's already tolerance, whether or not you're an alcoholic, addict, or anything else. Number one, this is medical fact. That doesn't matter if you're black, white, gay, straight, doesn't matter. Number 1. Number 2, Your brain, we know this definitively, your brain develops tolerance the more you drink. And your brain wants to get back to normal whether you drink 5 beers a day, 10 beers a day, a handle a day, once a week. So your brain is developing tolerance, even if it doesn't feel like a hangover or you're vomiting and stuff. And so many people have a physical dependence without being addicts, number one. Number two, psychological dependence is where the substance, the intoxication state is solving a psychological problem, right? This is why it's a three-part definition. So true addiction is a physical dependence with the psychological dependence, the substance intoxication state is solving a psychological problem. And number three, most importantly, it's a pathological relationship to intoxication, which is you have the same relational parts of the brain for attachment and love and all these things are exactly involved in your desire to manage withdrawal and psychological withdrawal. So that is why my definition, I agree over and above the AA one, because it catches people that yours doesn't, number one. And number two, it's objective. You can measure it. You can take a look at what happens in the brain and in the liver. And literally speaking, you can determine what actual powerlessness looks like in the brain, whether or not you have good or bad stories about powerlessness, because your brain will accommodate to excessive alcohol use, but you don't have to be an addict yet, because maybe your alcohol use that's excessive is not fulfilling this relationship to intoxication problem. Your higher power becomes intoxication, if you want to think of it that way.
Oh, it's probably technically correct, but really complicated.
Yes, that's why I live.
I mean, my tolerance went up from a couple beers to a case of beer within the first 3 or 4 years I drank.
Sure.
I had extremely high tolerance very quickly.
Sure,
Very quickly. You know, and that's unique. One of the symptoms of addiction that a doctor up in Minnesota came up with, he came up with a set of 8 symptoms. If you had 4 or more, you were qualified to make the diagnosis. One of them was abnormal tolerance. It can be actually abnormally low from late progression alcoholism,
or abnormally high,
or abnormally high. The rapid intake's another one. There's a lot of ways to look at it, but if you can't control the amount or whether you can stop or not, you know, and you have a pathological, we'll go with a pathological relationship. I just say with you know, a dependency with continued trouble too used to be an old simple definition too. But it's really
so there's
important.
one more.
Yeah, go ahead.
There's one more thing though. There's a Freud quote that proves I'm correct, technically.
Okay.
So Freud figured this out back in 1930. You know, repetition, compulsion, all this stuff. But in Civilization and Its Discontents, he wrote the most amazing quote that almost nobody fully understands, I think, even analysts, which is, he said something like, we are never more defenseless or powerless or whatever it is than when we are in love. And so that's exactly why addiction is a relationship to intoxication, because you're the most out of control and defenseless and hedonistic when you're in love, which is exactly what happens to the brain.
That's true. That's true. I started drinking, I was in love. Yeah.
That's what people do.
I was in love. Yeah. And by the way,
Right.
I used pot, but it was no different. I overused it too. Yeah, I couldn't control it either, and I used whatever's there. My funniest blackout, by the way, another one of those symptoms, you know, you don't have to have that symptom to be an alcoholic, but
Yeah.
I remember going out to eat. We were getting high and drinking at some party, and we went out to this place like a Shoney's or a Frisch's or whatever they have out in,
Shoney's.
you know, different parts of the country, you know, and I ordered 2 cheeseburgers, an order of fries, and a drink. And when they brought it to me, I went, man, I don't feel hungry now. And people started laughing. They said, well, Lockwood, you ate the same meal about an hour ago.
Nice.
That was my funniest blackout. Most of them weren't funny. That one was kind of funny. But anyway, all right, so definitions, yeah, just go. How about this? Go talk. If you relate to what I'm saying, what Patrick's saying, then you qualify. Then let someone else do the diagnosis, and that's what I do. You know, I can do a diagnosis, he can do a diagnosis, and we can tell you, because what we're going to tell you is you're different than other people who are not addicts.
Yeah.
The way your body works, the way your mind works are different. And
Yep.
that's what makes, and that doesn't seem to go away with time. It persists over time. It's a chronic illness. Addiction is chronic,
Yep.
and it can be terminal too if left
Yep.
untreated. So and there's definitely progression with it too. I call it related to diabetes, type 1, not type 2.
So,
My brother's
type 2 is
gotten over
different.
type 2 diabetes. He's gotten cured from it.
Hmm.
Not type 1. You don't get cured from type 1. So
Well, they're
anyway.
doing some cool genetic stuff for type 1 in China right now. But
Well, if they
aside from that,
can,
yeah,
maybe eventually
yeah,
they can, right, do it.
yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
anyway, so getting back to then, what do you do once you can see that you have the problem? Well,
Go
go
get
to
help.
someone. That's right. Go get help
Go
and
get
let
help.
them determine what kind of help you need. It may be
Yeah.
you can go straight to AA or a non-spiritual kind of program of recovery. It may be that you may just need to go see a counselor and with AA and then work it out that way if you can not drink for periods of time on your own without kind of a structured system. It may be you need detox and then outpatient. It may need detox inpatient or residential. It may be
Yeah.
inpatient or residential after detox and a three-quarters way house where there's some treatment, like a halfway out in treatment, or just a halfway house. So we're living, etc., for a period of time. Some people need it for a long time,
Yeah.
to be able to really make it outside of, anyway,
Yeah.
it depends, but I call it go to whatever lengths you need to go to make sure you win because it takes a lot of power because addiction is very powerful. Very powerful. You have the obsession, it's like a guy here that used to say when he'd lecture on it, he'd say it's like having a bad case of diarrhea and trying not to go to the bathroom. You're going to go. And you're going to drink or drug if the obsession is not taken care of. It's going to win. It'll win routinely. And you'll lose. And you won't be sober. So, anyway. But I want to leave some time in this one for us to talk about non-spiritual ways to recover.
Yeah.
And I know, I want to mention, I do want to mention one more spiritual way first because I have a little, it's just an educational point for people in recovery, particularly early recovery. Celebrate recovery. This big movement started
Oh,
years
yeah.
ago, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of people try and make it their primary source of recovery. I recommend they do not do that because Celebrate Recovery mixes problem types in the group. And I believe the alcoholic addict has to focus on their recovery from addiction because it's that deadly. And so even though there are people there that understand you and understand addiction recovery, I think you need an approach that's just solely focused on that. So your recovery needs to be primarily AA. If you have good NA's not been great around St. Louis. It's really good in some places, not real good in other places. I call it I'm not using heroin, but I can smoke pot, or I'm not using heroin, but I can drink. And that's not good NA. That's not a reality with addiction. Cross addiction happens too easily. I never used a narcotic, but I'll guarantee you I would love them. I would love them. I did take one to get over a headache so I could play in an all-star basketball game, and boy, it really worked well. That codeine was great. My dad had it for heart disease.
It's good stuff.
Yeah, it was good stuff. So I know I would have a problem with it immediately. And stimulants I didn't like because I already was too anxious and hyper, But, so I would tend to stay away from those anyway. But I would sure probably abuse them if they gave me the right kind of high. And let's not discount euphoria. But anyway, what about non-spiritual ways of recovery? What do you got for people?
I mean, I think there's a lot of different things people can try, and I don't really have a dog in the fight. I know this has been a lot about AA, and I'm all about it for people that want it.
Right.
There are a
But
number
not
of
everybody.
people. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then, there's a number of people I know out here in my area who do just like church support groups, which is different than Celebrate Recovery. And those help them. And so, I think if I were to just create some basic ideas of what I think will help, it wouldn't be a specific service like therapy or counseling or whatever. I think to me, the more helpful approach is what are the hallmarks of the kinds of things that help? So for me, some of the symptoms of something that will help include, is there some degree of fellowship? Do you feel like you
Right.
belong in some way,
Right.
right? Whether it's a friend group that's doing well, or a spiritual group, or a hobby group. Are you part of a softball league or what? I don't care, honestly. Like wherever you can find fellowship, find some fellowship. Find some people that you feel like can have your back and understand you to some significant degree, right? So I think fellowship is important. I also think
Amen. Right.
secondarily and kind of like mixed in with that is also the concept of accountability, right?
Correct.
So,
Correct.
and this is across any diagnosis, right? So like whether you have PTSD or major depressive disorder or a serious drug problem, we call it addiction, we all need people to help us stay on the path that we're on, right? And so maybe that's a spouse, maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a coworker, maybe it's a series of people, maybe it's that softball league. I don't personally care what it is, but
Right.
you need at least a couple of people you respect enough and understand enough to allow you to help be accountable to whatever changes you're trying to make in your life, right? So I think first is fellowship, second is accountability, third is simplicity. I hate it. I absolutely hate it. This is just me. You can disagree if you want, but I hate it when people try to complicate living better, right? It's not rocket science. I know that the disease, I know how silly this sounds because I just made a really complicated pitch for what the disease looks like in the brain and the
You
body.
did. You
Fair,
did.
fair enough, because like I'm an academic, so that's what I do. But but understanding the illness and managing illnesses are not the same kind of complicated thing. So there are lots of simple things you can do to get healthier, whether or not you're in AA or whatever. So, for instance, are you sleeping better? Are you eating better? Are you exercising enough? Are you laughing enough? Like, for me, recovery is this holistic experience of actually treating yourself better. And the people that choose not to treat themselves better are not in recovery, in my opinion. If you are 450 pounds in an AA meeting and you say you're all about God, but you're destroying your body, you're not surrendered, in my opinion. You know, you might have never drank in the last 25 years, but if you're still chain smoking and killing yourself, you're no better than Freud and Bill, in my opinion, that you're hypocrites and you're not actually taking care of your recovery. You've just stopped one behavior, but you're still powerless. So for me, recovery is more complicated than just saying you're powerless and going to AA and stopping drinking. There's a lot of dry drunks out there. So I go
Right.
holistic about
Right.
this. To me, someone who's doing recovery correctly has fellowship and accountability, but they also do a bunch of simple things that are actually good for themselves. Because that's contrary behavior taken to its logical end, right? Which
Right.
is
Right.
I'm going to sleep enough, I'm going to eat enough, I'm going to be nice to myself and other people, I'm going to whatever, right? Opposite of my character defects kind of stuff. So for me, it's just like, are you also doing the simple stuff correctly? Because if you're not, then you're not actually taking care of yourself, which is
Right.
the opposite of recovery.
Interestingly enough, I heard a podcast, a cancer doctor in the Mayo Clinic say the three things other than the actual treatment they do for the cancer: the diet,
Yeah.
exercise, and love.
Yeah.
She
Easy
says
enough.
if you can only do one, do love.
Love. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because you'll take care of yourself then. So
Yeah.
you'll find people in recovery, the ones that grow and begin to deal with the smoking, deal with the weight or eating compulsion, gambling issue, sex
Whatever.
issues, whatever it might be, depression, anxiety, whatever it might be, trauma, a lot of trauma, trauma,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, are the people that really, really grow. And they get the benefits of practice these principles in all our affairs and learning to take care of themselves. I think you're right. And there's also another category we should touch on: people that don't have any kind of recovery system but still stay
Yeah.
sober. When I did social history,
Oh yeah.
when
Oh
I worked
yeah.
inpatient, I heard about uncle, granddad, father,
Oh
mother,
yeah.
whoever that stopped drinking.
Oh
The
yeah.
doctor said, if you don't stop drinking, you're going to die.
Yeah. Yeah,
and they
yeah,
stop
yeah,
drinking, or something bad
totally.
happened and they stop drinking on their own. And I
Yeah,
tell people I would never technically, as a professional, recommend that you stop without a support system, some kind of recovery system for yourself, because it helps ensure ongoing recovery. It's not foolproof, but it helps ensure it. But there are many people that have stopped on their own.
yeah,
I
yeah,
just won't recommend that technically to people, but I know it exists, and so some people can do that. Mostly people whose, and this is not true either, 100%. Usually, early or middle stage addiction people can more easily stop on their own. I stopped for long periods of time on my own, but whenever I tried it again, I lost freaking control because I'm just different,
yeah,
and it's a whole family of that, the Lockwood family. Anyway, but, and so, but I want to note that for people. We're not
yeah.
selling anything here. If you can
Oh
stop on
no,
your own,
God
God
bless.
bless. Yeah, God bless.
Yeah,
Go ahead and do it. But
yeah,
it's always better to have a support system to help you do that. And it's worth the time. Do I want to go to a meeting every Friday night? Do I want to have to call my sponsor every week? Do I want to have to take calls from the guys I sponsor? No, a lot of times I don't, but I do it because it works. And I've got 45 years to prove that doing those things, praying, reading, recovery material, works. So I do it. So it's just part of my self care to do those things now. So I recommend that over doing it on your own, but some people can do that.
yeah. There's different types of people who probably can do that more easily. Like maybe people who have different personality traits, maybe people who are autistic or something. I don't know. Like there's probably various. Seriously, there's probably various types of like you're different in some important way where self-control is different or emotion, whatever is different. So like, go for it. If you really want to try, go for it.
Right. If you can do it, great. If you can't, if it doesn't work, go get help. Sit with someone to figure out what you need so it can work.
Yeah.
Because recovery is possible. I'm a living example of that, and I have many friends that are too, that are
Yeah.
living examples of this, that have really, every guy I knew in recovery, in that group I went to, as messed up as we were, they all took the program seriously, and their lives just grew and grew and grew and got better and better and better.
Sure.
It's just proof. I've seen their lives change over time because they took recovery seriously and they got that take care of yourself stuff. And they
Yep.
started doing things like that as they had more and more recovery. You know,
Sure.
a lot of us eventually got to trauma treatment. Some people are glad for that, I'm pretty sure, right, son?
Definitely.
Yeah. Anyway, so do what you got to do, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Kind of simple about that kind of thing now, and if you need
Yeah.
more help, get more help.
Yeah. I agree.
Any last words?
Mhm.
All right. Well, that's all for today. I was glad to spend some time with you, and I hope this was helpful to you.
Thanks for listening to Encouragement for Living Life. We hope you were encouraged by today's discussion. If you have a question, you can email us at lockwoodwithlockwood@gmail.com. We'll do our best to answer it on one of our shows. Hope to see you next time.